I met your new double O. She's a disarming young woman.
I get why you shot him.
Yeah, well, everyone tries at least once.
The Bond girl is defined as being the lead woman protagonist. She is the person that is there for the majority of the film, and she's the person who ends up in a romantic relationship with Bond. And she's defined by that romantic, intimate bond they develop at the end of the film. You get the typical Oh, James moment. That's typically the Bond girl. Women in the James Bond franchise certainly evolve over time, and these evolutions are often reflective of changes of women in society. When I look at the women of James Bond, nothing is more iconic than Honey Rider emerging from the sea in a white bikini with a knife attached to her belt and really, giving it to Bond, being like, don't come any closer, right? And it is this iconic, arresting image that gets replicated in subsequent films. In the 1960s, villainous women, who I think are far more interesting and delicious characters, are the ones who challenge Bond's libido. So in the 1960s, the swinging 60s, you see the influence of the women's movement, second wave feminism coming in. That's really questioning the role and the function of women. In the 1970s, those women are being sort of pushed away. The challenges to Bond and Bond's libido are being pushed away. And I've read that as being reflective of the backlash to second wave feminism that was happening in the 1970s and the 1980s. Grace Jones is a fascinating character. First and foremost, the casting of a Black woman in a lead role in a Bond film. This is the first time that it happens in A View to a Kill in 1985. But I think it's also important because you have someone like Grace Jones who is iconic. How do you contain someone like Grace Jones in a film? And I feel as though they looked at Grace Jones and said, you are so iconic. We're just going to take your persona wholesale and bring her into this film. And so I see Mayday as being Grace Jones or Grace Jones just playing herself. Now, is her representation perfect? Absolutely not. There's some problematic elements when it comes to racial stereotyping in this. But I do think it's important for us to see women of color and specifically Black women in lead roles.
I feel that I am definitely the new type of Bond girl. One who has brought the Bond girl image to the 90s, past to the next millennium. Someone who's got character, someone who kicks butt, someone who matches Bond in every way.
Electra King in The World Is Not Enough, she is the first woman arch-villain in a Bond film. She's the only woman arch-villain in a Bond film, and she masquerades as a Bond girl, seduces Bond. Bond falls in love with her. Even Judi Dench's M falls in love with her and is definitely taken in. And we as the audience are also starting to feel those feelings. And then it turns out that she's the one who's pulling the strings. And so Bond is blindsided, M is blindsided, we are blindsided. And it's so nice to see a woman being represented as pulling those strings.
Your Bond girl it's a marked difference from what was expected 40 years ago.
Yeah, and that was great. The challenge was, to stay toe-to-toe with him. And always, while we were shooting, always pushing the envelope and always asking Lee and asking the writers, okay, how can she be even tougher? How can she be even stronger? How can she be even more his intellectual equal?
Daniel Craig who's walking out of the sea in a bathing suit with women on the shore looking along, right? Bond is presented through the archetypical iconography of the Bond girl. We talked about Honey Rider already. He's presented like Honey Rider. And what that does is that opens up space for somebody like Vesper Lynd to not have to fall into that box. He's somebody who always resists the typical qualities and characterizations of the Bond girl.
For the first time, we're going to see that we have a Bond woman, as I say all the time, because Sam Mendes was looking for a mature woman.
And now we get to see a strong, black, vulnerable, quirky, comedic, sassy, very skilled woman be right there in a lead role. I'm really proud.
I would love to see greater diversity behind the camera for the people who are crafting this narrative. And when I say I want to see women behind the camera, I don't just mean white women. I also want to see women of color and women who differ in terms of their sexual orientation and abilities and nationalities and class-based elements and different parts of the world. I just want to see greater input from a greater amount of people.